The first speaker is Thomas Sarlandie. He's the head of developed relations of Pebble. His topic today is about how wearable devices are exploding and how different wearable devices can collaborate together. So let's welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to my presentation on wearables. And more specifically today, I'd like to tell you how we at Pebble are trying to contribute to a larger ecosystem of wearable devices, tell you how we build wearable devices, how we build them, how we think they can collaborate together, and how you can help us make this a better ecosystem. I've been with Pebble for 2 years now. I'm in charge of developer relations, and I'll give you my contact information at the end of this presentation. An ecosystem is about trying to create an environment in which everyone is supporting the other elements of the ecosystem. That's kind of how simple we can make the ecosystem be, I think. And the first thing to create an ecosystem of wearable devices is to be able to build wearable devices. And so here in Shenzhen, you have everything you need to build new wearable devices, but I wanted to share a few of the things we've learned at Pebble as we were building wearable devices. And the first thing I wanted to share with you is this picture. This picture is from a YouTube video that you can find on the internet from Eric, who is the founder of Pebble and who made the first Pebble watch back in 2006, I think, or 2007, very early. And to make the first version of the watch, he just used an Arduino, a Nokia LCD screen, a Bluetooth module, all those things that were already available like almost 10 years ago and that are still available today. You can go out after my presentation and just buy them here at Maker Faire. And he put them all on this board and he built this first wearable device and started playing with it. And kind of the message here is you don't need to be a super guru in electronics to build a wearable device. You can start with just a few modules, put them together. What matters most is the ID. And once you've this ID and you've built your first prototype, you should start looking into thinking about what it's going to look like. And so this is the first Pebble watch that later went on Kickstarter. And it was a very important step in the development of the Pebble where we actually had the enclosure, the industrial design, and we knew what we wanted it to look like. And we went out and we started looking for feedback. Do you like this? Is this something that you would wear? Do you think it's comfortable? Does it work for male and female? And those kind of questions. And in that pictures, you can see that there are 4 wires coming out of the back of the Pebble. That's because the electronic is not even in the watch. It's just a screen. And the box is the microcontroller that was outside. And when we were demonstrating it, especially for the Kickstarter video, we actually had the box duct taped under the arm and the watch outside. And we could still show it to people and say, hey, what do you think? Do you like this? So if you're working on wearable devices, don't be afraid to do a hack like that. It's just important to get the product and start getting feedback on it. So that's really a key point here. And so over the years, we've built a family of products. The first one on the left is the Impulse watch. It was the first watch made by the company. At that time, the company was not even named Pebble. It was called Alerta. And then we made the Pebble Steel, and now the Pebble Time, which was launched this year on Kickstarter again. And over the years and those different products, we've learned a number of things that I wanted to share about building wearable devices. The first thing is that if you're building a wearable device, battery is going to be extremely important. And very early on in your design, you should think about power consumption. Because no matter what you do, one of the characteristics of wearable devices is that they are going to be battery powered, unless you want to actually tie the people up to the wall with some wire, but no one has tried that yet. So your product is going to be a compromise of battery life, features, size, and as you can see on this, those are the components inside the Pebble. The battery is actually much bigger than the electronic. And a lot of the questions I answer when I do public presentation like this is, why don't you have a solar panel on the Pebble? Or why don't you have a GPS? Or why don't you have an NFC reader? Or why don't you do Wi-Fi? And the answer to all those questions is power management and power balance. We need to balance the autonomy that we can give to our users with the battery life, the autonomy of the product. And so with the existing Pebble, we aimed for 7 days battery life. We knew how big we wanted the product was, and then we made choices, we made compromises to reach that goal of 7 days. So that's my first point, is battery life, power management, extremely important in a wearable device. And so if you're not making a wearable device yourself, but you're making components or you're making software, if you're thinking about getting into the wearable space, think about power management, because it's extremely important. The next point is that wearable devices are meant to be worn. The user is going to put them on in the morning, maybe even don't take them off at night, have them with them all day. And so you need to think about your device not just in the context of an office or a lab or a nice air-conditioned room where everything is clean. You need to think of your device in the context of something that the user is going to wear all day long, is going to be outside, going with their daily life. And so your product has to be solid. If you're using a screen, your screen has to be readable outside in bright sunlight. And your product has to be solid. So think about, banging your watch against the walls and things like that. No matter what device you make, even if it's something that you put in your pocket, you have to be extremely careful that the product is resistant enough. So think about product going outdoors and making them solid. And another point that we have worked a lot on is waterproofing. If you're making a wearable device, we think waterproofing is extremely important. Not just because people will go swim with your product, but if you're making a watch, people swim with their pebbles, but also because they're going to sweat on their pebble, they're going to be outside in the rain, they're going to wash their hands. And so for all those normal moments of life, if they have to think about your product, if they have to be scared of, if they're going to be scared of breaking your product, the integration with their life is not going to be as good. So think waterproofing and work on that too. Last but not least, at building a wearable product is that you have to be prepared to do a lot of software development. This is the floor plan of Pebble a few months ago, and on that floor plan you can see that the blue area are where the software engineers sit, the red area is where the hardware engineers sit, and HR, finance, and all this is the purple box. And so you can see that software is 65% of our company, and that's because we spend a lot of time doing firmware development, but we also have mobile apps for iOS, for Android. We have a website, we have web services, we have an app store, we have apps that you can install on the watch. If you're building any kind of wearable device, having a hardware competency, hardware skills is extremely important. But that's only the beginning of the story, and you need to really make sure that you also will have the skills to also build the software aspect of your product. And so that's how we build our first wearable device. But right now, this is still very self-centered, very Pebble-centric. And so I want to talk a little bit more about how we grow this into an ecosystem. And I think the first part to build that ecosystem is to actually get a community and get a community around your product. And a lot of people know us for our Kickstarter campaign, and everyone talks about the Pebble Kickstarter campaign, and they say, oh, they raised X million on Kickstarter, which of course is very important. I mean, the dollars help a lot when you're trying to build a product. But I think the biggest, most important number on that page is actually the number of backers. When we did our first Kickstarter campaign, we got 70,000 people who said, hey, I like your product. I want to be involved in the development of the product. I want to help you make that product better because I believe in it. I want to be associated with this product. And then when we had questions like, hey, what do you think should be the colors of the Pebble? We could reach out to that community and get their feedback, and they helped us a lot. And then when we actually started shipping the product, we had all those amazing people who were doing marketing for us and giving us feedback on the product and taking all those really cool pictures and basically doing a lot of free marketing for us. So that was really amazing. And so when people talk about Kickstarter, they focus on the money, but really the community is a huge aspect of Kickstarter. And so if you're doing a Kickstarter, really take that into consideration and really leverage that community. And so when that community started getting their watches, they started wanting to make it their own and started wanting to contribute to the product. And the way they did this is with apps. So we decided we were going to be an open platform. We were trying to be as open as possible and let people interact with the product at multiple levels. And the first level of interaction was making apps, and specifically making watch faces, which are those small apps that show you the time on the watch. And so that's on Impulse, the first watch. We had not even sold 1,000 watch, and we already had that guy who was like, I'm going to make a watch face every day for 30 days. And so after a few months, we almost had more watch faces than we had users of the product. You know, it was just pretty amazing. And that's all because if you give people the opportunity to contribute to your product, they will, because they love being a part of a story. And so when Pebble shipped a few years later, of course, we reopened the SDK and we said, okay, go ahead, continue making apps. And again, people made a lot of apps. And then someone in the community said, okay, but all those apps are great, but there's no place to download them, find them, rate them, you know. So I'm going to make an app store. And this guy created this website called mypebblefaces.com, where he started inviting developers to upload their apps and take donations from users and give the donations back to the developers. And so when you reach that point where you start to have money flowing and people are supporting each other and giving feedback and doing things for each other, you know, it's not a one-way relationship where people are giving to us anymore. It's people giving to each other in that community. And I think that was the first real sign that we were on our way to build this ecosystem. And that's still all software. But that also expands to hardware. When people got their watches, they started thinking, oh, I would like to personalize it more. You know, we had 5 colors, and so they thought we could do stickers and put the stickers on the watch, or we can change the bands. And again, we tried to have an open approach. We used a standard band size, band format, so it was very easy to come to Shenzhen, buy a lot of NATO straps, and sell them to the Pebble users. And so we started seeing this exchange between our users where one would start buying stickers or manufacturing them, and someone else would say, oh, that's great, can I buy them from you? And this continued when we released 3D models of the Pebble. People started making docks to charge your Pebble, and at first they were just STL files that they were sharing on Thingiverse. And very quickly, it turned into Kickstarter projects where people were saying, hey, I'm making this charging dock for Pebble, or I'm making this specific strap for Pebble, and so if you want to buy it, you can just go on Kickstarter and get the product. And so I think that's when really we can talk about an ecosystem, because we now have people that are making money from being a part of our community. And of course, this helps us because this gives more visibility to the product. This makes the product better. And so that was the really important role of our community in the development of this ecosystem. But I'm here today to talk about building an ecosystem of wearable devices. And right now, in my slides, there's still just one device, the Pebble Watch. So let's talk a little bit about wearables with an S and see where we are today. There are a lot of wearable devices on the market. You can buy ski goggles that tell you how fast you're going, where you are, what direction you're going, where are your friends. You can get smart glasses. There's a bunch of them available now. You can buy a heart rate monitor, which is maybe one of the simplest wearable devices that you can buy today, and they come with a watch that gives you the information of your current heart rate. You can also buy clothes that have a heart rate monitor embedded in them, or buy the bands that track your steps, smart shoes. You know, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with all those wearable devices. But if you look at them today, it looks very much like that. You have a bunch of devices that live on their own, and they're all in their little bubble, and they all have a battery, and they all have a screen, and they all have a radio, and they either talk to your phone or they talk to your Wi-Fi network. But it's not very much of a, doesn't look like an ecosystem at all. They're not supporting each other. They're all living in their own little bubble. And so what we'd like to see more of in the future is a situation where you have a device at the center. For example, let's take a Pebble. And this device has a battery. It has a radio link to your phone or to the internet. And it also has a screen. And this device can connect to other wearable devices that don't have screens or radio link or very low power radio link just to cover the distance from your shoes to your wrist. And they can all take advantage of the capabilities of the wearable that's at the center of the picture, the new hub for your wearable communication. So I think we're ready for that. We have the technology. We're starting to see this happen. Bluetooth LE is making this possible. But it's still a little bit of a wild dream. Today, I can come here on stage and say, this is the future, you know, but what am I really doing to make that happen is the true question. And so now that we have a wearable device, that we have a community, that we have more wearables that want to integrate to build that ecosystem, how do we actually turn this into an ecosystem? And I think part of the answer, and that's why Pebble is here at Maker Faire, is the makers community. We've been really supported by the maker community. I talked about all the ways people can personalize their Pebble, but people have been hacking their Pebble like crazy, building robots that they can control with the accelerometer, or building flip-flops that sense how many steps you make and directly send that information to your Pebble via BLE, making clothes, making this water sprinkler system or garage door opener. You know, we have a lot of those projects that are available on the internet. And this community is really active building things. But until today, it was kind of hard to actually connect directly onto the Pebble, to use the battery of the Pebble, to use the screen of the Pebble for hardware hacks. And so one of the things we announced with Pebble Time is the arrival of this new accessory port, which is on the back of the Pebble over there. And so this is how we charge the Pebble Time, but it's also a serial port. And so you can connect accessories directly into the Pebble. You can use the battery that's inside the Pebble to power your accessory. And of course, we're making this completely open so that anyone can build those accessories. You can download 3D files from our website, print your own adapter, and start connecting to it, and then build apps that take advantage of that serial port. And using this, you can think of a lot of exciting use cases. So for example, you can have a GPS attached to your wrist, and you can go for a run without taking your phone with you anymore. You can have an NFC sensor. You can have a glucose monitor that's attached directly to your wrist. You don't need to have a separate device. And again, you can share the battery, share the radio, share the screen, so also bring the cost of all those devices down. So one example of that is this very early prototype of a 3G connected Pebble, where we're using the connector on the back to connect to this electron module from Particle and connect to the internet. Or to make it a little bit easier, we're working with Seed Studio, and one of the products they will offer is this adapter for hackers that you can put directly on the back of the Pebble, and that connects you to the Shadow line of modules. So you can just take any of the Shadow modules that are already available on the market and start working on your own prototype of your wearable devices that live and work with the Pebble. And to support that, we've announced that we would give $1 million to projects that use the Smart Strap accessory port. That means if you have a project that uses Smart Straps, you can launch it on a crowdfunding platform, contact us, and we'll contribute to your campaign to help you launch your product. And we're very happy to see that the first project using the Smart Strap connector is now available on Kickstarter. It just started a few days ago. It's called Aria. It's a sensor that is very similar to the Mayo, for those who know it. You know, does hands gesture recognition. And so with this accessory, you can control the menu of your Pebble just by touching your fingers. So if you touch your little pinky, you'll go up. If you touch your thumb, you'll go down. If you press your hand, you will select. And this way you can navigate into the menus of the watch or into the apps without using your second hand. So for example, if you're cooking with your watch, that's a usual problem. using your second hand. So we're very happy to start seeing projects like that appear on Kickstarter, appear in the community. And so we think we've finally closed the loop. And with this, those wearable devices, the community, the wearables that are available, or the various sensors, and the makers, we now have finally an ecosystem of wearable devices. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you, Thomas. Actually, may I have you a few more minutes on the stage? So we have a few more minutes here for open for questions. So if you have a question, you can for Thomas or about wearable technologies or about Pebble, you can raise your hand and then we'll do this. Anyone?
Please ask questions. I love questions.
Okay.
After the wrist, where else are you thinking of putting technology?
Myself, or where do I think the industry is going?
Pebble.
Pebble. So Pebble is very much focused on wearable technology. That's kind of how we want to define ourselves. And we're going to still be focused on the wrist for a little while because that's something that we've learned how to do. We think we're doing it pretty well. So right now, there's no plans to go anywhere else than your wrist. But we do want to work with other companies that are putting sensors in other places. We do believe a lot in like sensors integrated in clothing and things like that to help make all the promises of wearable devices more of a reality.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for interesting presentation. I'd like to ask for how you organize the information of the human to collaborate third-party application or third-party hardwares.
How do we organize the information and allow people to collaborate?
Yes.
Yeah.
So for example, if I put it on the Pebble, then Pebble can recognize how I am doing every day. And then when I wake up, when I sleep, or every kind of information, it can be correct. Then how do you manage the information, and then how you are interested in to use that kind of information together with our makers so far?
Great question, thank you. So we have a quantity of sensors on the Pebble that generate a lot of information, and right now the level of information that we provide to the developers, to the makers, is still very raw. So we give you access to the accelerometer, we give you access to Bluetooth information, we give you access to GPS from the phone. And so using that, you can already build a lot of interesting use cases, but I agree with you that there's more interesting things that you can build if you can not reinvent the wheel every time. And so things that we're looking at is, for example, instead of just giving you accelerometer information, is giving you the number of steps that the user has done during the day, or what activity the user is doing now. So that if I'm sitting at my desk, maybe when I look at my watch, the font is small and I get lots of information. But if I'm running in the street, you can show me less information because it will be harder to read, you know. So this kind of activity classification is one of the things that we're looking at, that we want to provide to developers, and that we want to allow apps to communicate with each other, so that one app can provide information to another app. This raises a lot of questions around privacy. You know, we don't want to share more information that the users want to actually share. So this takes time, and I think the mindset of customers are also evolving, and we'll see more and more contextual information, so that instead of just having accelerometer information, you'll have activity classification. Instead of having GPS, you'll know if the user is at home, at work, or in the transport. You know, we'll give more meaning to the data that we provide to the apps. Yes.
Thank you. We have time for last question. So, okay.
Thank you. So I imagine there have been some obstacles when you try to bring the product from idea to mass production. So were there any such challenges in production, and what did you do to overcome those challenges or difficulties?
Yeah, so there were many challenges. I think what I'd like to focus on is that the biggest challenge is building a product that's useful to customers. I think the biggest problem, the thing that we specialize in, is making a product that's useful, a product that's easy to wear, that's helping the user go through the day. And all the manufacturing problems are just technical difficulties. You know, just like when you're doing software, it's more important to think about what you're trying to build than what technology you're going to be using. And I think there are a lot of people in Shenzhen that are really good at helping you go through the technical difficulties. The hardest part is finding the right people, and we've worked with a lot of amazing people, both in China and in Taiwan, who've helped us go through the manufacturing problems and helped us focus on the product and on manufacturing the product. And so my advice to people in the US or even people here who are like product developer is focus on your product more than on the manufacturing. I think we meet a lot of people that are trying to learn how to do pick and place and CNC, and you don't need to learn all of that, because no matter how much time you spend doing it, you will not be as good as the people who do this for a living and have been doing this for 20 years. So just focus on your product, understand what are the constraints, understand how they work. You know, this is very important, obviously, but stay focused on your product. And I think staying focused on the core product is something that Pebble is very good at, and that's one of the reasons why I'm very happy to work there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.